Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to be together today with this panel discussion, which is titled Work-Life Integration Insights from Women Professionals. And we're excited about the 4 women professionals that we have with us tonight. My name is Valerie Hegstrom, and I'm the coordinator of Global Women's Studies here on campus. And Global Women's Studies is housed in the Kennedy International Center, and we were grateful for their support. And we're grateful to be able to have a program in Global Women's Studies here at BYU. And we have 4 great BYU graduates, women who are working in different professions. And I would just very quickly tell you their names, and then I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about themselves and also their careers. And so let me just say that we have Denika Torres with us, and she's the Director of North American Commercial Cards in Citi, and then Eliza Campbell, who was a Global Women's Studies minor when she was here at BYU, or Women's Studies minor before we went global. And she's Associate Director in the Middle East Institute. Marie Kulbeth, who is Chief Operations Officer and General Counsel at SixFifty, and Rebecca, whose last name I'll ask her to pronounce, and she's Vice President of Human Resources at AgReserves. And so let's just start in that order that I just introduced you, if you don't mind. Denika, will you go first and just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your career, please?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so, Valerie. Thank you for the invite, Corey and Valerie. Pleased to be here with you. I'm Denika Torres. I graduated from BYU in 2006. I'm now a director at Citi's Institutional Clients Group. I manage a team of 9 in my division. And what we do is we are in the payment space. So my role with the team is leading business development, working with our global partners on increasing our market share in North America and globally. And then also I wear another hat at Citi. I'm a diversity and inclusion business lead. What that means is that for Citi, I'm one of 14 business leads that meets with our ICG Diversity Council. I love having that hat and making sure that Citi is diverse in every section of our business. And then thirdly, I'm a mom to 3 kids, 1 9-year-old and 2 3-year-old twins. A little bit about my career is that I actually started as a development consultant. I worked at the World Bank after having a stint in some organizations in development consulting. And after, a spur of different random events in my life, I found myself at Columbia, and I found myself working, to a private sector role, right? A banking role. I'll tell you, a bit more about that journey, but I'm pleased to be here, Valerie, and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
We're grateful to have you here. Thanks. Eliza, would you go next, please?
Sure. So I am happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. I graduated from BYU in 2015 with a major in political science and minor in women's studies, which I was very proud to do, and studied with Professor Hegstrom and had many good experiences with her. And since then, I kind of went all over the place. I got really interested in the issue of refugee aid and migration. And then I lived in Jordan for a year or 2 after doing the BYU Arabic program. Just working with some development organizations, trying to get a feel for the field at the time. This was in the midst of the refugee crisis, the so-called refugee crisis from 2015 to 2017, and then ended up going back to my mission country, Bulgaria, as a Fulbright scholar, where I worked with the UNHCR. And then after finishing my master's at Georgetown, I guess this past year during the pandemic, time seems to not be real, so it's hard for me to realize what year that was. I had a position during school with the Middle East Institute, which is a DC-based think tank that works on Middle East policy and on foreign policy, broadly speaking. And I do a bunch of different things at the think tank, but primarily work on issues related to technology access, human rights, and equity in the Middle East and beyond, and kind of help develop new programming for the think tank space. So that's a little bit about me, and happy to be here. Thanks again.
Thanks, Eliza. Marie?
Thanks. I'm actually just really excited to meet the other women on the panel so far. This has been great. I've worked with Rebecca VanUuitert, who's going to introduce herself next before, so I'm already excited to meet Eliza and Denika. I'm a lawyer, so I was a BYU undergrad where I studied political science and had a development minor. an international development minor. And then I went, I did an LDS mission after that in Zimbabwe, and had a really strong interest in international law. So when I came back, I went to law school, also at BYU. And following law school, I clerked for the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which oversees federal appeals cases in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I went from my clerkship to private practice. I was a litigator in Salt Lake City, and I did primarily business litigation, but I was able to pursue some of my personal interests in the international sphere by representing nonprofits, primarily that were in Sudan and Latin America, while I was in private practice. Then I left my private practice to go back to BYU. When I was a student, I always said I would never come back to Provo, and I just like could not stop coming back. So I came back to BYU to the law school, where for several years I was the admissions director, and then I became the dean of communications for the law school, which gave me great opportunities to work with students, to start running diversity recruiting programming, pipeline programming, and then in my role in communications to start diving into technology and law issues, which became the jumping off point for my next career move, which is where I'm currently at. I'm with SixFifty Technologies. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Wilson Sonsini, which is a large international law firm. And what my company does is we build technology solutions to help make the law more accessible. So we do that for customers, and that's the space where we make money. And the thing that makes me really excited is that we also do it for individuals to help with access to justice problems. So we have like a really cool pro bono focus that I also get to work on. So my current focus in life, I would guess, is privacy law for my for-profit side. And on the nonprofit side, I've been doing a lot of work this past year in expungements for people with criminal histories. And I've been doing that both with my company and with the work that I do at BYU. So I still teach at the law school as an adjunct faculty member for the legal design program, where I help students learn about how to take what's called a design thinking approach to solve access to justice problems. And I also teach a class with Corey Leonard, who a lot of you might know from the Kennedy Center. I teach Model United Nations. So I would say I'm an example of a person who, with my career, have definitely, gone in one direction, law and technology, but the underlying passion that I developed in undergrad for development work, I've been able to really sustain through a lot of the pro bono projects that I've been able to participate in.
Thank you, Marie. Rebecca.
Wow, I just want to echo that I wish I could spend a couple hours with each of the panelists, getting to know you guys better and learning from you. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say tonight. But just to introduce myself, I'm Rebecca VanUuitert, and I'm currently the Chief Human Resources Officer at AgReserves, which you may not be familiar with that name, but it is the Agricultural and Land Development Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we are actually the largest agricultural production company in the United States. We run several different lines of business. We have thousands of employees, not just in the US, but around the world. We operate in 7 countries. And it has been a really interesting ride for me at AgReserves over the last year or so that I've been here with the company. But to just back up a little bit, everything comes full circle to Model United Nations. That's how I know Corey Leonard. My husband and I actually were, I think, Corey's 2 favorite TAs that he ever had. I'll just say that right there.
I was a TA too, but he's actually told me you were his favorite. So.
So yeah, this goes way back in time to Model United Nations. I graduated in 2002 with my bachelor's in international studies. From there, I went to Wall Street for a couple of years. Just that's how it worked out through networking, which I'll be happy to talk about. Through networking, I got a job in corporate finance for a couple of years. From there, I went to law school at St. John's University in New York. From there, I went to a global corporate immigration firm by the name of Fragaman. It's the largest business immigration firm in the world. I was there for over a decade, and I worked with corporate clients, helping them bring their foreign national employees to the US to work and to be here in the US with their families. I also was the pro bono coordinator for Fragment's Chicago office for many years. So I got to have the best of all worlds. I had a big firm paycheck, but then I spent at least 50% of my time working with undocumented youth, asylum seekers, refugees, assisting them obtain the immigration relief that they were entitled to, and helping the other attorneys in my office also develop a caseload and manage a caseload of pro bono cases. From Fragment, I came out to BYU Law School, where I was the Dean of Career Services for a couple of years. That's where I met Marie Kulbeth, and just had the great pleasure of getting to work with her and some of the other great women at the law school. So I was at the law school for a couple of years, and as I mentioned before, now I'm at AgReserves, just in Salt Lake. During the pandemic, of course, probably like everybody else, I'm basically working from home, which has been really great because we have 4 kids. They are ages, they all just had birthdays. Maria is 15, Jesus is 14, Manuel is 12, and Roxana is 10. She's telling me she's on the floor right here next to us. So that's another whole story that we could get into at some point, but my husband and I became parents after we'd been married for 13 years. We have 4 kids now, and that has changed our life all for the better. So I'll turn it back over to you, Valerie. Thanks for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you so much. I am just going to throw a little curveball here, because as I'm listening to the 4 of you introduce yourselves, I recognize just how impressive you are and how impressive your careers have been, and just the variety of experiences that you've had, the places that you've gone after leaving BYU. And I'm just going to guess that some of the students who are listening in, or who will listen to this recorded panel later, might feel like they can't see themselves in you. They can't see that future. How are they going to get from where they are as BYU students to where you have made it? And so I'm wondering if any of you have any advice about what they need to be doing now as students, or how you get from being a graduate of BYU to being able to have a successful career story. So I'll just open that up and let anyone answer who would like to.
Can I ask Rebecca to answer? Because I happen to know she has a great answer.
I'm not exactly sure what answer you're looking for me to give, Marie. Can you?
Oh, just because I've seen you work with so many students in the past and help them learn like how to network. Because I feel like for me, when I came to BYU, I knew nothing and I knew no one. I had no network, and learning that skill was a huge thing that took me a long time. But I feel like you speak to it just so well because I've heard you talk about it before. Sure.
So thanks for the prompt.
Sorry.
I'm the biggest believer in the power of networking, but I don't love the word networking. I would rather call it relationship building and discovery. If you're calling it networking, it sounds really transactional. It sounds really, kind of schmarmy, like glad handing people at cocktail parties and whatnot. But I think relationship building and discovery is a better way to focus it, because if you're curious about the world, if you're curious about people and what they do, you can be building relationships anywhere you are in any context. And, I didn't even know where to start when I was about to graduate from BYU, and kind of muddled my way through it and figured it out. But the way that I can look back and see that I became successful in finding job opportunities, and the way that I've seen a lot of students do that, is just open your mouth. And you don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. You don't have to pretend like you've got it figured out. You don't have to anything. You just literally open your mouth and you say, I'm a senior and I'm about to graduate and I don't know what I'm going to do. Do you have any suggestions? And just listen to people. Hear what they have to say. Ask them if they know anybody that you could be connected with. And the more you ask that question and the more people that you meet, the more information that you're gathering and synthesizing. And someone will say something that sounds really interesting, or they'll say something that you're like, ugh, that sounds terrible. I would never want to do that. Well, that's great. You just learned something about yourself and your interests or maybe your aptitudes that is going to guide you that next step. So most job offers come through networking. There's data that backs that up. So I think anybody who's listening to this or participating tonight, you've made the first step by attending this, and just continue to talk to people and make friends and ask them for their ideas. And that's kind of a first step. Is that what you're looking for, Marie?
Yeah, I think so. I would just even say, like, just this week, I've been making some hiring decisions, and I had some candidates that were basically, I mean, in terms of capability and background, and just like in our space, really similar. But the thing that helped one candidate sort of get an edge was a referral that I received, actually, because I saw something on the person's resume and I said, oh, I know somebody at that nonprofit organization. I'm going to call them and see if this person really has done that thing. And really is interested, because like I said, our company has this pro bono interest where we do some community work in addition to our traditional work. So I reached out, and that person at that nonprofit group did have really good things to say about the applicant. And so this was a part of the applicant's network that they didn't even realize I was going to be like understand and aware of what it was that they were doing. So the network made a huge difference, and the applicant doesn't realize that yet because I haven't told them that that's what made me really interested in them. But yeah, it was absolutely part of it.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Rebecca mentioned of networking, right? And what Marie mentioned of having that work ethic or that ability, right, for others to see what you bring to the table. I also want to answer Valerie's question with saying learn to do the hard things. I remember the first experience that I got, or the first opportunity that I got at the World Bank, was actually using one of my really hard econ course statistics software, right? And I remember thinking to myself, when I saw the description, like, I'm never going to get this job. But then I also remember that I worked really hard at BYU, and I could do hard things, right? And I could be thrust into, a challenging project and come through on the other side. So I found that to be very helpful in my experience as a development consultant, right? Learning to do the hard things and not being scared, right, of the challenges. When I was at the Organization of American States, somebody asked me, my first project there was leading a cadastre system project, right? It didn't seem too sexy at the beginning, but what I found is that Microsoft actually sponsored that program. So in the end, I found myself working with, managing $1 million Microsoft grant in Peru and Colombia and Costa Rica, right? But the initial thing sometimes as women, right, is that we can't do hard things, right? I want to challenge you and do hard things at BYU. They're going to give you the confidence to do hard things, and really great things in your career and, in your personal life. And just, giving you one clear example, Valerie, right, of doing hard things, the reason why I've been able to, to progress in my professional life is sometimes now, because I have a reputation of being able to bring different partners and doing the hard things. Sometimes my boss says, sometimes I just think of the hardest things or hardest challenge we have to do, and you're top of mind, right? And I've heard that, but it began at BYU. And I think if you take heart to it, you can find, a way to make a career out of those hard things, right? And become an expert in your field.
Thank you. Eliza.
Yeah, I just thank you all so much for all of that. I think it's so wonderful to hear all of this, and I echo what everyone says, that it's exciting just to get to know all of you. And you've said such lovely, positive uplifting things that I'm going to go ahead and feel a little bit bad saying something kind of mean and negative, even though I think it answers the question. And that is, for anyone listening, if you go and read about WeWork, or go read about the Fire Festival, or watch the documentaries, they're on Netflix and Hulu, or go read about Theranos, this medical supply company that turned out to be a complete fraud. So these kinds of stories, even though they're really disturbing in a way, because basically, if you're not familiar with them, each of the premises in some way echoes this idea that there was this kind of big, exciting idea that someone had, an entrepreneur of some kind, and that a lot of people at really high levels of government, industry, everywhere were willing to get so excited by that idea without really checking the premise behind it and making sure that there was a way to get it done and that the person proposing it was qualified, that they threw money at it. And 90% of the time, there's one case obviously where this was a woman, and 90% of the time, I hate to say it, tends to be a man who gets to pull this off because that's just how it works. So when I look around the world and I see people who are in positions of power, many people are doing great work. Some people are doing terrible work, and they've been given a lot of status and a lot of power and a lot of respect, basically without having the skills to back it up. And even though there's two ways to read that story. The first one is it's kind of upsetting to see how often this tends to happen. And I think, the last couple of years in politics in the US have helped prove this in some way. But there's another way that is really kind of interesting, I think, especially to women, which is that some guy is probably doing a terrible job doing this. And so you can just do it. Like, honestly, like I know we should, get the skills, get the knowledge, what's been said, network. But at the end of the day, sometimes it takes just a little bit of like understanding that someone might be doing it badly and getting a great salary and getting a great job and getting their dream position just because they asked. So sometimes it really, I think, just does take realizing that people are doing it. You can also do it. They're doing it badly and not afraid to do it. So why not you?
I might
Eliza,
just tag on. Oh, sorry, Valerie.
No, go ahead, go for it, Marie.
I was just going to say, I was going to tag on and say, I get imposter syndrome at my job all the time, where I'm sitting here thinking like, why am I the person in the room that gets to decide this? And part of it is because I went for a job that I was terrified of. So yeah, if there's something where you're like, I'm not sure that I'm qualified, if you're willing to work hard, go for it. I totally agree with that. But I do think it's something that maybe as women, we do tend to struggle with, or at least I think it comes up more when I'm talking with fellow women professionals that we struggle with this. And I think it's also proved out with job applications. The statistics show that, by and large, men will apply for things that they don't meet all the requirements of the job posting, whereas women tend to not apply if they don't meet every single one. Apply, put yourself out there. And if somebody, if you give a great interview and they look at something, they like something in your resume, you'll have the chance to prove yourself.
Yeah, that's great. I think that imposter syndrome, among other things, are sort of one of the challenges that women face as they think about starting a career or being a professional woman. And I'm wondering what kinds of other kinds of challenges the four of you have faced. And maybe at the same time, you could talk about, those challenges, talk about things that you've done to try to deal with the challenges or overcome the challenges.
I can go ahead and start just because I think I'm the only one without kids. So I think maybe this is a different set of challenges. Okay, Marie too. So usually when I hear people talk about like balancing work-life challenges in the context of being a woman or being female identifying, we usually think of someone married with children, which I think that's a huge legitimate concern. The state of how we value childcare, especially in the US right now, is abominable, basically. I think we have devalued those roles and that actual work, because parenting is work and we just don't treat it as such, is really awful. And I think the past year of the pandemic has proved that, as women have left the workforce in droves. But I think there's also a double bind that when you're a single woman, and I'm single, have no plans to get married or have kids anytime soon, I think sometimes the same type of dynamic exists in a workplace. This is what's happened to me. This is just my personal experience, where for some reason, when you're a woman in a space full of a lot of men, there are just certain types of work that we don't really code as paid work, or we don't really code as work that men do. And this tends to be, you know, the emotional work of like, you know, navigating someone through their first day, or like little administrative things like who's going to remember to get this for this party, or who's going to answer the phone, or who's going to go get someone at the front. And even though I'm in like a pretty, you know, semi-advanced position in my career now, and I've heard this from a lot of women in much more advanced positions, there's still this tendency, I think, where if you're in a room, men and women both just assume that some woman will take care of this stuff, and that it's not compensated, it's not paid attention to, it's not thought of as work. And it does get really exhausting. And all of you probably have experienced this just in your personal lives, you know, in church and families, whatever. So I guess I don't really have any solution to it. I think this is an ongoing challenge, and it's honestly, it's not, you know, I think it's across workforces and across industries from what I've heard. So I'll let the other panelists, if you can speak to this, maybe think about what you've noticed and if this is something that you think you have ideas on. But one thing I've noticed just in my, you know, my career thus far, you know, talking to other people in respectful ways about it, finding your cohort, you know, finding your foxhole in an office. And this is a form of networking. I think I agree with the idea that networking is more like relationship building. But I think, yeah, finding your, you know, people that you can trust wherever you are and being able to have open dialogue with them about what's happening. And then in certain situations, setting boundaries with people and saying, you know, you need to understand that this is my time. You need to understand that this is my role. This is not my role. I'm not going to do work for you for free. I'm not going to check your email for you, which is something that I've been asked to do by one boss once. Yeah, I think that can be a starting place, but I will stop there and maybe you all have thoughts as well.
Eliza, I think that's you brought up some really important points. And I think that most every woman, unfortunately, professional woman or otherwise, has been given tasks that are not hers to do, but she's just going to be expected to do. I think that what you were saying about, you know, speaking up and talking to people about your concerns about that is really important. Just a little kind of tidbit there, or just a little tip, I guess is the word I was looking for. When I have found myself in similar situations, whether it was at church or at work or in whatever context, it isn't fair, but when that happens, we do need to speak up. And I feel like I've been able to do it a few times more successfully than others. There have been a few times where it did not achieve the goals that I was looking for, but the times where it has worked, it's when I have just said something like, I took the notes last time, it's your turn this time, and like slid over a piece of paper towards one of the men in the room. Or, you know, there's this thing where cleaning up conference rooms after you've just had a big meeting, right? I will say something like, hey, everybody, let's all grab our stuff. You know, so that the men in the room are a little bit more aware, not all men, but some men in the room that are not aware of these things are like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm being a slob, I need to go and pick up my stuff. But just speaking up and saying things about your turn, it can make a difference and just kind of clue people in that, oh, there's this thing I need to be aware about that I haven't been paying as much attention to that I should have.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo, you know, those two scenarios. And also, you know, one of the challenges that I've had to overcome is, you know, what is it that I really want to do and what is it that I really want to be, right? Because sometimes, you know, we try to, even at work, right? We try to think, what does my boss want me to do, right? What does my team want me to be, right? What kind of, you know, manager do they want me to be, right? Or even in our personal life, right? We struggle with what is the ideal of an LDS woman, right? Is it working women? Is it a stay-at-home mom, right? And there's going to be, many different avenues or pathways that we can take. But I think what I would say is some of the hardest things is, finding your own voice and what, will bring you fulfillment, right? And I want to share a story with you. When I had my first son, right, I was in the middle of, my hardest semester at Columbia. And at some point, I think I had a one-on-one, heart-to-heart conversation with my husband. And he said, you can leave Columbia, but I know that this is something you really wanted to do, right? And in that moment, I knew that it was something I had, dreamt at BYU of doing. I never thought I would do. And I found myself, living a dream and a goal. And I really had to think, what do I want to do? And I was very nervous being a mom and finishing grad school, but I was able to not only complete my Columbia degree, but I was able to go to Singapore and bring my, what then at the time was, close to a year old, son to Asia and live with my family for, a year and have a great experience as a family, right? And, you could say, I would have been happy either way, regardless, right? I'm not imposing, one path over another, but I really think that at that moment, when my husband asked me what I wanted to do, I think I really found what I wanted to do, right? And I hope that you find what you want to do without, the prejudice, without the concerns, without the fears, right? And I think you'll be able to find that path, because that is, one of the hardest things that I think navigating your career, you'll be struggling with is, sometimes there are biases imposed on us, right? For me as a Latina, sometimes when I'm being direct, right, I'm seen as aggressive. Sometimes when I'm being, dedicated, I'm seen as, passionate in not a good way, right? So, but when I think of myself and how I want to be as a professional, as a person, I just find that I want to be myself, right? And I try to find that true voice. And I think that's what I would say. It's one of the hardest things. It's finding what you want to do and finding your true self and being true to that true self, right? It's very hard. It's very challenging. But once you do, it's also really rewarding, right? To pursue, your goals and what you're meant to help and who you're meant to, make an impact in their lives, right? Whether that be your family, your professional. For me, it's, in my community mentoring. Others. So yeah, I think that's something I wanted to add.
Can I just say really quickly, sorry, there's a couple of people in the waiting room to get into the meeting and they can't get in. Is there any way we can let them in? Sorry for interrupting.
No worries, Annie. Corey, can you please take care of that? I go ahead.
I was
Marie,
just
go
gonna say, I'm gonna send Corey a text because the class that we teach together just started. So he might not be listening, but he's got the chat open. So
Okay, great.
But at the same time, I do just want to sort of echo what Denika was saying in terms of finding your voice and maybe share an experience that I have had where it was hard for me to find my voice. It took me a few years. So when I first started the practice of law, I was at a law firm that I was excited to be at. And I was, the most junior associate in the room. I didn't hire on with, usually when you graduate from law school, your firm will have like a cohort of first year associates that are all at the same level you're at because you all got hired together. But that wasn't the case for me because I had done a clerkship with a judge and then gone to my firm. So in some ways, I didn't really have anybody that was similarly situated. I did have some friends at the firm that I'd gone to school with that had been there longer than I was. But I worked specifically with one partner that was just known as having a very over-the-top personality, if I can put it that way. But that personality included a lot of inappropriate behavior in terms of things that were said, jokes that were made that were not funny, towards myself, towards our assistant, towards other people. And I went along with it. I laughed at the ones that weren't too horrible. I did those things because I thought that I needed to do that for my job. And I'll be honest, I got a lot of great mentoring from that same partner in terms of my actual work. He was a very good person to learn from. He had great experience. But at the same time, I was having this really tough interpersonal experience with him. And I didn't know how to handle it appropriately. I just wasn't quite equipped yet to do that. I hadn't faced that behavior before. And one day I realized how bad it was because we were on a conference call with our clients. And I was in the office with the partner at my firm, and the clients were off site, and we're talking, and he made one of his comments that I had gotten so used to, right? And one of the clients says to him, he says, "Isn't Marie in the room with you?" Like, he was so shocked that that would be said. And having somebody else point it out for me really kind of woke me up to what I had like gotten so used to. And that's when I decided to start looking for another opportunity. I realized it was a really negative work environment for me. And the next work environment I was at BYU, which was so different. But one of the things that made it really different was that when I got there, I got partnered up with a mentor. Rebecca will know her, Dean Sorensen. She was my immediate supervisor, and we worked together, and she was such a different person to learn from. Just like my previous partner, she had so much experience. She was so great to learn from in terms of the actual work, but she was also really invested in me as a person and as a professional. And she would ask me questions like, are there other projects you want to be on to expand your skill set? Are there meetings you want to be included in, just so you can see how they work? And that taught me so much about how to mentor other people in the office. And it really changed my approach to what I would and wouldn't accept going on around me. And so I think, when you're looking for opportunities, be aware of the fact that workplace culture will have an impact on you. And I don't know that me leaving was the right choice per se. Like, I could have, tried to find my voice at that firm, but I wasn't. At that point, I was so tired. So it wasn't, like I said, like a huge success in that sense, but it taught me, like, I had those two really different experiences. And it's also not just a male female thing. At the same time, when I went to the law school, the dean, Dean Smith, was also my mentor, and I learned so much from him and had such a great similar interaction that when I left the firm, he said, "I hate the firm." When I left the law school, he told me he hated to see me leave, but he was always happy to see people go on to bigger, better experiences. And that's what you want from the people you surround yourself with at work. If you can find a situation like that, and if you can help create a situation like that for other people, like, I missed out on an opportunity to make the situation better for my assistant, right? I didn't do that. Now I've learned. And so hopefully, as you all go into the workforce, take that with you, and just remember, you might feel like the lowest person on the totem pole, but there's somebody else who's also experiencing the bad behavior if you end up in a bad position.
Thanks, Maria. I'm really grateful for your honesty. I'm wondering if any of you who have experienced unfortunate incidents of sexual harassment in the workplace, or if you've seen that happen in the workplace, have you come up with ways? And I totally understand why Marie would have chosen to leave the position she was in, but are there other ways? How do we best handle that kind of situation in the workplace? Do you have suggestions?
I have a lot to say about that. I would say that my experience as a professional woman and having friendships with other professional women, I'm surprised when someone hasn't experienced sexual harassment in the workplace or discrimination in the workplace. I'm shocked, actually, if I ever speak to a woman who hasn't. And that's a reality that I don't think I had thought about when I was an undergrad at BYU. But it's certainly real. I have so many examples. I'm just trying to think which one is the best one to share with you right now. I guess here the wisdom I would share is that if it happens to you, when it happens to you, you are not alone. And you need to speak up. And it's hard to speak up. I think that I understand pretty well on some level why it is that women don't report harassment or sexual violence or other things that may happen to them, just based on my own experience, which was very, very, very minor. My reputation and my credibility was scrutinized, and it was like I was being put on trial, even though I was the victim in the situation. I think that, this is all to say that it can be really tricky. And my advice here is, speak up about it. Don't stand for it. And wherever you can, any workplace that you're ever in, even right now while you're at BYU and you have an on-campus job, wherever it is, find women who will be your allies within that particular department or organization or wherever it is that you're working, and build those relationships and those friendships so that if or when something like this happens, that you have someone that you can rely on. And I'll just share just a quick example there. So I was looking for female mentors when I was living in Chicago, and I took the train to work every day. And, I hadn't found that person at work that was going to be this great mentor for me. But I was just trying to just keep my mind open and my eyes open to who might be able to provide some advice to me. And I was noticing that on the train, there was a woman who got on the stop after me every day who was always revising documents. And I could tell they were legal documents, not like spying on what she was reading, but it was pretty clear that she was revising legal documents while she was on the train. And I watched her for a couple of weeks get on the same stop after me. And finally, I got up the courage. I sat down next to her and I just said, "Are you a lawyer?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm a lawyer." And straight out of my mouth, I said, "Will you be my mentor?" She's like, "Oh, this is weird." But we rode the train together for years. And having somebody outside of my law firm to bounce things off of and to get her perspective on things. She is this amazing litigator, represents one of the largest companies in the country. She makes millions of dollars, and she's really good advice on how to handle workplace drama. And, to this day, still, I turn to her for advice. So you can find mentors if you're willing to. Going back to that same thing I said before, just open your mouth, be curious, try to build relationships wherever you can, and you'll be surprised. Women really want to help other women. They know what they've experienced and they've seen what others have experienced. And so if they have the opportunity to help another woman, most women will take that opportunity.
So we're coming down to just about the last 13 minutes of our time together. And I want to ask one more question, and then I'm hoping that we'll be able to have one or two questions from people who have joined us in the audience. Although I have to admit that I don't think I have access to the chat. And so if you do want to ask a question, you're going to have to raise your hand and actually ask it, unmute yourself and ask it through the mic. But let me just ask this last question, which is, we've talked about a lot of challenges and problems and things that women face all the time in the workplace, or from time to time anyway in the workplace. And I would really like each of you to be able to talk about how having your career, having your profession has been rewarding for you, and how it has made your life more meaningful, and how you've been able to integrate that with your real life. I mean, it seems to me that the four of you are enthusiastic about the jobs that you do. And so what's the secret there about why is it that what you're doing is something that that is really rewarding to you?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. And, again, I for those of you who joined late, right, I had a career as a development consultant. I worked at the Organization of American States and then later on the World Bank. And after graduating from, my graduate degree at Columbia University and the National University of Singapore, I found myself in a career in a private sector, right? And I felt like I wasn't going to have as much fulfillment as I did in my prior role. But actually, one of the things that I found out is you can have, an ability to make an impact in regardless of what career you find, right? I think, Marie and Rebecca and Eliza have mentioned, really good examples. And one way I've been able to, find fulfillment is, when I was at BYU, I was, a business major primarily. And then going into a networking event, somebody told me, you want to be in business and banking, and there's no Latinas that have the roles that you want to have, right? And for me at BYU, it was crushing, right? I changed majors. I, I did a lot of things to shift my priorities, and I found a really great career. But again, after grad school, I pivoted into what was my initial, goal at BYU, and I've been able to, be in boards, for really passionate causes that that are dear to my heart. Currently, right now, I'm in a young board that raises funds for a low-income neighborhood in New York, and for $600 we provide a private school education for girls from underrepresented minorities in the Bronx, in Queens, and these girls ride by train 2 or 3 hours a day, to get a private school education. And the things that I do and that professionals like me do, make that possible, and so I've been able to find that niche, that thing that pulls my heartstrings, and that helps me be an impact and helps me be a mentor. And then the second thing is, from that experience that I had at BYU, when Latinas or when women, LDS women, whether at work or outside of work, come to me for advice, it can be in their own careers or goals, even in education, I talked to quite a bit of women in our state, who are at Columbia, married, with children, without children, at different stages. And sometimes I'm able to offer advice just because I've felt, that prompting, that where I am, I can be visible, and people can say, I know you have a different path and a different experience, but I want to hear from you, so mentoring others, making a difference, and finding kind of that reward that you're looking for can come from different, careers and different venues. So I think that's very important for you as you're, at BYU, is, you can make an impact in different ways. Don't be afraid of making an error or making a mistake, You can always find, your path.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I might follow up on that a little bit as well, and say one of the things that I've really loved about my life, and the way that I find, I have a lot of things in my life that I feel like make it fulfilling, and a lot of it overlaps. When I was in school, I'm from the South. I had never explored mountains and deserts and things. When I was in school, I had a group of friends that got me outside, and I became an outdoors person. And it's really funny because I'll be, on a trip where, I'm canyoneering in the Utah desert somewhere, and I'll meet a new person on that trip, and they'll be like, how do you know all these people? And I'll say, oh, I'll look around, I'll be like, I went to law school with almost all of them. Because my friends in school that I shared that interest with introduced me to their interests. And so I've been able to actually network by relationship building outside, which is one of the things that I love. Like I don't know if I hadn't experienced the outdoors, I have no idea where I would be living and what I would be doing with my career today, because that has actually impacted my career. Because I've made choices based around, all of the life experiences I want, not just my professional experiences. So, coming back to Utah to work, working at the law school at BYU, I've been able to really combine a lot of my passions. I've been able to travel, experience that outdoor lifestyle, and also make time for other things that are important to me, sort of echoing what Denika was talking about. Like, I have a lot of passions that I don't necessarily explore in my day-to-day job. I'm a huge law nerd. I could talk about nuances of really boring legal stuff all day, but I also really love the pro bono projects that I get to work on. And so, I sit on the board for an organization that runs schools in South Sudan. I sit on another one that I just started, I helped found this year, where we work with the tribal communities in Utah. And it started because of COVID, because there was some particular need that some other lawyers and I were trying to help fill. And now it's this thriving organization that has a lifespan that I think will exceed all of the original members. So there's lots of ways to find fulfillment in your personal life, through your relationship building, that can spill over into your professional life, because a lot of the people that I work with in my regular job have become people that I go outside with, or people that I serve with in the community. So I think there's just like lots of ways to find a full life balance, whether you have, kids or don't have kids. You're always going to have people that are your people, and finding a way to balance that. And I just think there's lots of options.
Thanks. I think Eliza agrees and has something to add.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you so much. And I guess kind of jumping off of that, I would say, I think there's kind of a false notion that I ingested from a lot of people at BYU and a lot of people growing up as well, that work and personal life take place completely separately. And it's convenient that that framing, I think, has taken place because for many, many years, work was something that only men did and taking care of families was something only women did. So it made sense that things were thought of that way. But we all know, and you all know, everyone listening, even if you're not a parent, even if you're not married, that that's not the case, that you bring the skills of compassion, your interpersonal skills, your art skills, your design skills, your math skills, whatever, into your relationships. They're part of who you are. And you bring your relationships, who you love and how you love interacting with people and what's important to you and what motivates you into your work. They're really not separate. And so I guess I would say I don't think there has to be so much of a delineation. And I think it's not so much that you need to defend having a career or having a family. It's more, again, like I think Marie said, about thinking about what makes you who you are, what brings you joy. We are that we might have joy. And for many people, that means trying to change the world. That means trying to contribute to the world. That means trying to make art or trying to, work on scientific exploration, means taking care of people in whatever form that looks like. And so, yeah, I think first and foremost about that, about what really matters to you. And I think that will guide knowing how to find the distinction between the two things and to find when and how you do what.
Thanks, Eliza. Rebecca, do you want the last word on that question?
I don't know if I should have the last word, but I'm happy to share just a little bit here at the end. Eliza, I think there's just a lot of wisdom in what you're saying about an integrated life, right? There is no such thing as work-life balance. There's just life, and we all live it, and we bring who we are to the table, to work, to home, to our communities, to our neighborhoods. And using those skills and those strengths in all those different areas is what makes us whole individuals, right? And I just want to say too that I think that I think when I was at BYU, I had this idea that the most important thing I could ever do with my life was to become a wife and a mother. And while those are really important things to me, and I've had a lot of value in that, I wish that I had thought about it a little differently, and I wish that women in the church in general would think about it a little differently, to think that the most important thing that I can do is to listen to the Spirit and to follow the path that God wants me to follow. That may be marriage, it may not be, it may be motherhood, it may not be. But what's the most important thing you can do with your life is what our heavenly parents want you to do with your life, not necessarily some cultural expectation or something else that might be out there. So I wish I had given myself a little bit more freedom in that regard when I was younger. And I'll just say that my lived experience to date is that the women I know that are the happiest and the most fulfilled are those that have had a very open mind about what they're going to accomplish in life, and have been really open to the Spirit guiding them and helping them see what unique strengths and talents that they had to contribute to the world, and didn't confine it to one specific thing or another, but that they were open to that inspiration. And I would just say that, anybody who's listening today, I just want to say I really do believe that you have a unique role and a unique voice and a unique life experience that God is going to use. I don't know how, but that's the joy of your life and your discovery, is that you get to figure that out. But you do have something important to say. You have something important to do. And if you're open to that guidance from our heavenly parents, you will get it. It might not come in a big flash, but you will eventually, little by little, you will see your path unfold.
Okay, thanks so much for being here. This was just terrific. I want to thank Corey Leonard for organizing this event, and I'm really grateful to Eliza, Rebecca, Denika, and Marie for being here. And in the fall, we will have another event like this, and we're hoping to do this again in the future and hoping that maybe we can have these same terrific panelists at some point. This has been really wonderful. Thank you so much.